Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG podcast. I'm Ramon Mejia. I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course author interviews. This week I have 4 new LitRPG reviews for you, including The Trials of a Modern Paladin and also Winterborn. Then after that it'll be Gameport. And last but not least, Light Online, book number 2, Keeper. So 4 new titles reviewing for you. We've also got some great LitRPG news. We're going to get right into that with the LitRPG news section. And in LitRPG news, we're going to begin with Negative HP, which is a podcast about books, games, and dark and weird stuff. Our LitRPG authors Laura Hughes, aka Demi Harper, and Jonathan Smidt were on the Negative HP podcast. Go give a listen to the particular show. They were recorded a while ago, I guess, when their books first came out, but it's just been put up on a particular podcast. They talk about LitRPG, Dungeon Core novels, how they got into writing in the genre, and also why Laura thinks Dragon Age Inquisition is the worst multiplayer ever. She really does go on for about 10 minutes. I'm like, but with her accent, it sounds super adorable. But they talk a lot of other gaming stuff and favorite games and RPG stuff, and go give us actually quite entertaining. Also in LitRPG news, we have Luke Chmalenko. He posted an update on his website for his plans for 2020, including his new baby girl, which we, of course, give him a great congratulations on. What's next for the Ascend Online series? He's splitting the book in 2. I thought he might. The next Mark of Kings fantasy story, which has apparently done so amazing. And a new project called Starfall, which he's very mums about, but it puts something he's excited about. So definitely go check out, go through the full story at his website. We'll link in the show notes, or just go to lukechmalenko.com. Also, LitRPG deals. We have Portal Books, who's published several actually really nice LitRPG stories. They are putting the first books of many of their series out on sale for 99 cents until January 3rd of this year, 2020, which is the new year. So congratulations, everybody. You made it through another year. We have more LitRPG titles to look forward to. So it's actually really a chance to pick up some good reads. So definitely go check that out. We'll listen to the show notes for those particular deals. And on to our 2020. Thank you very much. We all made it through another year. We read tons of LitRPG, and I wanted to start off this year by talking about the top 10 LitRPG stories that I had from last year. It was a very long list. It took a much longer time than I thought it would to put this together. But I did finalize like the top 10 stories based upon the review scores, not just myself, but also some of our contributors, Ian Mitchell, and Ray Johnson, who does the LitRPG Audible podcast. But looking at everything together, these are the top 10 that I've come up with. And here we go. They're not in any particular order. We have Dragonheart, Sea of Sand, book number 4. This is actually a pick by Ian Mitchell. He really kind of sold me on this in his review and in a conversation with them. He really enjoyed the entire series, but book 4 apparently really did it for him. It's a combination of LitRPG and book stories. He said he liked it so much, he almost gave it a perfect score, which is like high, like things like 9.8, 9.7, 9 out of 10. And he said he liked it so much more he actually surpassed the Cradle series. So that was definitely high praise. So that makes the list this year. Also for me, I have The Crafter, book number 1, Legacy, written by Alison Foster. It's just a great crafting story that I think is definitely underrated, and on review scores and also just by people in general. Also, though, I'm also a crafting fan. I love crafting. I have it in all the stories I've ever written for LitRPG. And just, it was just this stellar character development, world building. It was just like some really good stuff from the story. Days after I finished the story, I remember like just thinking of some of the cool things the main character could do with his main character's powers. It's like, oh, that's such good story stuff. And whenever that happens, that's always a good recommendation for me. Also on the top 10 list is Dakota Kraut's Rexus, the Completionist Chronicles book number 3, technically, although it's a side story for one of the characters. But it was just so funny I couldn't help but there's like an easy decision to put on the top 10 list of the year, in addition to getting a great review score. In my notes for the original review was like probably the funniest thing the author's written to date. This is a great sci-fi story that incorporates many puns, awkward situations, and humorous banter that is a must read if you want to laugh. So there we go. Also on the list, this is from 2019, is The Wandering Inn Volume 2. Remember, everything on this list was published in 2019, so even though there are other stories might not look better, these are the ones from this year, from 2019 rather, I should say. And this is a good series. This is not a good series. It's a great series. I liked book number 1. I thought book number 2 was great. And I liked book number 2 more, which is not always the case. But this story is just like this epic continuation of these great characters in this portal. A little lighter sometimes in the RPG stuff, but it's definitely part of this world. There's just such good adventure and world development and character development and, great main characters. I think I like the fact that book 2 added more development into the other main character, and also incorporated more action stuff, which I was a fan. Book 1 had a very slow start, but this is a slice of life serial story online, so you can actually read the future volumes online if you want to go check them out. Okay, also on the top 10 list for the year, and this was a little surprising to me, to be honest, Kaiju Battlefield Surgeon, a little bit of adventure. I don't give out personally a lot of 8 out of 10s. If you look at my review scores on our website, LitRPGpodcast.com, under the novel recommendation section, lots of 7s. And that's what I scroll through for a long time today. Very few 8s. And the 9 and 10 list has been like almost untouched for quite a while. But Matt Dinniman's Kaiju Battlefield Surgeon was just such a surprise to me that it definitely made 8 out of 10. It was a great story. But I was super surprised that I even liked it. Like, I had talked to the author last year about the story, and he was describing just kind of the gore and horror that he was planning to put in the story. And I was like, I'm not sure I'm going to finish the story. I remember thinking to myself when he was describing to me, because I'm not a horror fan at all. I'm not a big fan of like gory storytelling or gory like films. But I'd read Matt's other stories, Dominion Blades, and I love that series. It's really nice. And so I wanted to give this a fair shot, and I went into it, and I was surprised just how much I enjoyed it. I did honestly skip some of the like gorier scenes, but there is such interesting storytelling here, and it's so unique. And I'm always a fan of unique and people who take risks in what they put out there for new storytelling. That it just has a special place in my heart that it then ripped out at the end, which I won't spoil for you guys. But it combines horror, gore, a healer trapped in a game thing, and just like these weird kaiju battles, which is like a lot of weird things together. And it's just this unique story, but it's not for everybody. I'll say that right off the bat. Is like, again, if you're a fan of horror and you like LitRPG, you're probably gonna like this. If you don't like horror at all, or like gory scenes, don't read this. It's not gonna be your cup of tea. But for me, I remember at the end of the story, like just thinking about this for days and days, like, man, this thing just kind of haunts you a little bit. Some of the scenes. And to me, that's a mark of good storytelling when it sticks with you for a while. So I enjoyed it. Again, but not for everybody. Definitely read the novel description before we decide to pick it up. Okay. Also on the list this year is Sacrificial Pieces, the game, book number 3. I'm sorry, the game. The game. I just got the game instead of Gam 3. This is the last book in the game series. This came out the early 2019, which I almost forgot that this was published this year, or in 2019 rather. But I really like this series. This is one of my favorite sci-fi literature series. It's probably top 2, if not the top 1. I'd have to look through my list, but sci-fi series that I've ever read, and it just has some great storytelling, but it incorporates not fantasy, which is always a nice change of pace. We have so many literature stories that are fantasy oriented. This one is not. This one definitely hits sci-fi hard. Hacking, AI, spaceships, battles, all the good stuff, and just cool stuff all the way through. And this was the last book in the series, and it came out this year in 2019 rather. Just amazing fun. This one actually is the only one on the list that got like a 9 out of 10 for me. So high praise indeed. Also, this year's top 10 list is Rising Allies, a LitRPG adventure. New Game Minus book number 2 by Sarah Lynn. Sarah Lynn is definitely one of the authors from 2018, 2019 that I think was one of the best breakout authors. So I was like, oh, this is somebody who can consistently write LitRPG well. She has new ideas. She's incorporating new concepts. It's not just like the same old kind of tropes and storytelling that I've read, literally hundreds of times. She did something new and it worked out. And in book 2 in the series, which came out in this year, 2019 rather, she continued on with that series, and she continued on making that new little twist that she had in the series work well, and she did better. So this definitely hit it for me. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Also on this list for best top 10 books for 2019 for me is Reborn Apocalypse, a LitRPG Wuxia story, Volume 1, written by L.M. Kerr. This story combines Wuxia, which is like cultivation stuff, martial arts, with a LitRPG story. And there are other stories that do this, including like the one at the very top list that Ian recommended, Ian recommended. But this one for me was one that really captured my attention. One, because I'm not a huge fan of necessary cultivation and Wuxia on its own. This one had a very interesting and very clear progression system that really just like captured my imagination and let me kind of zone into the game mechanic, which was a big draw for LitRPG in general for me. When I can see the game mechanics and I plot my own fun characters, and I can spend time just not even reading, just like going into the mechanic. I'm like, what would I do with these points to make my character OP? And this one just had like a nice system in addition to like really good action. And it was, for me, it just felt different and new. Even though it is still doing like this tower dungeon thing, which has been done before, even in the same year with another story. Like a lot of people who read this story, like, oh, I think I've read this premise before. Is it copying it? And everybody's after like not even like after the first chapter, like, oh no, this is different. This is fine. But they do have very similar to other like Tower of Heaven. So, but this one I think did Wuxia just like combined it just a little bit better, and it worked really well for me. Also on this year's top 10, 2019 top 10 list, Life Reset book number 3. This is written by Schumer Cousins. It's the last book in this particular story arc. I don't know when we're going to get another one from Schumer, but this was fun. This was just like enjoyable, and it was just nice to kind of see this like arc that finished the storytelling very well. And this is always a favorite series of mine as well. It does a monster main character story. It does chapter of the game. It also does like some really good town building stuff. And I think this is probably one of the more premier monster main character stories, because the main character actually is a goblin, and that race culturally is very distinctive from human characters. And it's one of the things I think monster main character stories, it's kind of defining characteristic when that culture aspect for that monster is really no different than a human. For me, it's like, oh, that's kind of a waste of opportunity. And Schumer always did a really good job of making that goblin culture, making the fact that he's a monster a key component to the story, and making it different and making a different story than just like another human, trapped in a game store or whatever. And he's done that really well. And then book 3 ended that arc very nicely. And I think it's last, last but not least, top 10 list for 2019 is Greystone Chronicles book number 5, World at War, written by Dave Wilmarth. I think this is the only one in the series that got an 8 out of 10 for me. And it's the end of the series, for now, probably. And it was just like this great conclusion. It tied off all the nice storylines. I think there may be a few story threads, or quests that just weren't completed or whatever, but, hit the major plot lines, hit you in the feels, quite a few places, and just good action adventures. Like, I'm always a fan of a nice finale, to a series if it's done well. And the rest of the series had always like gotten good reviews for me, but this one kind of just took it to a next step. It was like, oh, okay, this one definitely knocks it up to an 8 out of 10 for me. And plus, there's just like an adorable, cute cover, and the author apparently has also made plushies for Fibble, so that's always an extra bonus, I guess. But that's it. Those are the top 10 LitRPG stories for 2019, and I'll read them off to you again in case you just want to look at them or like get names for stuff. That's going to be Dragonheart, book number 4, The Crafter, Legacy, Rexus, The Wandering in Volume 2, Kaiju Battlefield Surgent, The Game, book number 3, Rising Allies, which is the new game minus book number 2, Reborn Apocalypse, Life Reset, book number 3, and the 5th book in the Greystone Chronicles. So there you go, folks. Out now includes Shroud of Warsanger, book 6 in the Nora series. We have book 3 in the Scourge Wars series called Resist. We have The Land Monsters, which is the 8th book in the Chaos Seed series. We also have a world called Memory, which just came out recently. Also Skyclad, Fate Anvil, book number 1, which is apparently a popular online series that is being published on Amazon now. Recommended for other people I know. Haven't read it myself, though. Also, Rebel and Jack book number 3 is out. And also new audiobooks. We have new audiobooks out since Christmas. The Crafter's Defense book number 2. Dead Man's Retinue and NPC Pass book number 3 is out. The first book in the Scams and Schedule series, the Good Guy series. The 4th book in the Dungeon Lord series, Ancient Traditions by Hugo Huesca. I really like book number 1 through 3. Haven't read book number 4. This might be the way to get me onto it. Animal Kingdom Right is out as an audiobook as well, as is Melee book number 1. So there we go. So those are stuff that audiobooks. We also have a bunch of stuff coming in the near future, including on January 6th, No Mistakes, The World of the Changed by Vasily Mihenko. This is actually a nice story that I'll be reviewing next week. We also have The Destroying Plague, Discardian book number 3, out on January the 9th. On January 20th, it'll be Dungeons of Strata, Deepest Dungeon, book number 1. On January 24th, it'll be Quest for Dominion, book number 4 in the Hero Online series. We have Viridian Gate Online Dark Siege, out on January 28th, 2020. On January 31st, it'll be Endless Fantasy Online, The Elk Kingdom, which is the 2nd book in that series. January 31st, it'll be the 4th book in the Legends Online series. February the 4th, it'll be Battlemaster, The Crown of Blood, book number 1. February the 6th, Skull and Thrones, the 3rd book in the Bad Guy series. On February the 10th, it'll be The Equation with One Unknown Invasion, book number 2. On February 29th, it'll be Seeds of Chaos, book number 4. March the 9th, it'll be a new series called The Incarnator, Project Stellar, book number 1. March the 5th, the 5th book in the Hero Online series. March 20th, the 3rd book in the Underdog series, The Dark Continent. April the 2nd, it'll be the 8th book in the Guy series, Eastbound and Town. And April the 15th, Dragonheart, Sea of Sorrow, the 5th book in that series. So there we go, folks. Now on to new releases and reviews. Okay, first review up this week is The Trials of a Modern Paladin, The Trials of a Modern Tabletop Group, book number 1, written by Kevin Culp. It is 281 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited, and here's the author's description. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to become your favorite fantasy tabletop character? Would it end up being a dream come true or a horrific nightmare? What if you were forced to play the role of the character completely and couldn't act out of character even if you wanted to? That is exactly what happens to the protagonist, William Sharkrow, in the first installment of The Trials of a Modern Paladin. William is an ordinary man living an ordinary life when out of nowhere he finds himself in the body of his longtime character, Arceus, in this Isekai-style fantasy story. Forced to play the role of Arceus and act with his paladin code, he must navigate the shocking new world of magic, all the while questioning whether it's a dream. He quickly realizes that life may not be all it's cracked up to be after facing frightening conflicts and becoming entangled in this new world's politics. While he is quite overpowered, having made it to level 20, brute force can't resolve some situations. Arceus makes new friends and new enemies during his travels, but will he ever find his way back home? All he can do is keep pushing forward and discover the truth of why he is here. So there's actually a 2nd book in the series already out. I can't go into book 2 without reading book 1, so I'm reading book 1. And I actually give it a score of 7.4 out of 10. It's a slice of life, overpowered little bitty story where the main character is transported to an RPG fantasy world as his level 20 paladin tabletop character. It's kind of a casual story that explores what it would be like to be in these same kind of tabletop conflicts where you're your character, basically. And again, the main character is max level for his tabletop system, so he's already super overpowered. And I still found it entertaining though, because there are different ways of creating conflicts on any kind of like fighting scale. Like the main character is always overpowered, but there are other social issues, and I really kind of enjoy the way the game mechanics were played out. The game mechanics, well, there are no shown to the audience, rather. No character sheets, no notifications of the story. Instead, the main character describes everything. So you're still getting the game mechanic stuff, but it's not shown in the version of like a table or like written in text with numbers necessarily. It's the main character telling the story, and he's describing to the audience, the reader, what his character sheet looks like, including like some numbers and stuff, and like some of the game mechanic stuff. So you're still getting game mechanics, but it is a little removed, I guess, but it's not hidden from the audience. So it is still LitRPG, but if you want something super crunchy with like numbers everywhere, this is probably not going to do it for you, but it's still an unreal story. There's also like an interesting mechanic in the story where the main character is forced to role play his character. And it literally changes his responses in the story from like what he was planning to say, and he tells the reader, to what actually comes out when he's speaking to the NPCs, to the others, the other inhabitants of this world, which I thought was a nice little twist to that enforced role-playing aspect. So kind of neat there. Overall, it's a cute slice story, good action, with an overpowered main character. If that's something you're in the mood for, I think this might do it for you. Good score, 7.4 out of 10 from me again for the Trials of the Modern Paladin, Trials of the Modern Paladin tabletop group, book number 1. And next we have Winterborn, written by Stuart Gross. It is 274 pages, $3.50. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited, so gonna have to buy this one. But here's the author's description. There are many worlds in the cosmos. Many of them have rules and laws that are likely utterly alien to the world that we know. Most never leave the world they were born into, never even know or suspect that other worlds even exist. Their souls simply go through the cycle of reincarnation again and again, always forgetting their past lives and living as they please. But some few are given the gift of transferring after death, to live their next life in a different world, with memories of their past lives to enrich the world they go to with new concepts and new ideas, and bringing back those same from the world they visited when it's time for their next cycle in the old world. A young woman suffers a tragic fate and is granted the ability to transfer. She is reincarnated into a new world full of monsters and magic and things that would be mere myths and legends to her in her old life. This time, she promises, will be different. She doesn't have to be weak here. She doesn't have to be a victim. She can be strong, and no one will ever control her again. There you go. And if you read anything by Stuart Gross, he's written some dark stuff with sexual content. This isn't one of those things. There's kind of a dark start to this story a little bit, but overall, it doesn't have any sex. It's very much a very more I want to say traditional story, but it has some things that aren't in the dark side of what the author writes sometimes. So I actually enjoyed it quite a little bit. It's a good kind of tabletop LitRPG story. The female main character is transported to this fantasy RPG world that follows D&D, specifically 3.5 rule set. And the author talks about that a little bit in like a forward to the actual story. Game mechanic wise, the story is actually rather crunchy. Like there's tons of numbers in this thing. And the author actually shows the roles he does for all the stuff he does in the story, whether it's combat or saves or skill checks. The author actually shows the roles and the combination of like all her main characters, skills and whatever else she has in there. And so it's kind of fun to see the numbers roll out and see like, oh, this is a super bad role, and actually have it impact the story. And there's even one from the show where like the main character just has a series of bad roles where it's like, oh, this might end the story early. And even though there's a good section of the story, I'm like, oh, because the roles were bad, there were actual negative consequences to the story, which I thought was really fun, because in an actual table game, you make a series of bad rolls, your character just dies and you got to re-roll, right? I was kind of curious to see where this went, but there are actual negative consequences for negative rolls. And it was kind of fun to see those for people who who don't like as many numbers, you can kind of skip through past the rolls themselves, and you still get a really entertaining story. In addition to those things, you get, of course, item descriptions, character sheets, all the good stuff, and nice character progression. It's actually nice to see this kind of homebrewish class, and to see the main character like really think through the process of character creation choices and also how she wanted to progress as she leveled. And so that all the game mechanics in this are done really well. And if you're familiar with the tabletop 3.5 D&D experience, you're going to kind of be delighted by a lot of the references that are made to this. On the story side of things, it's a kind of a slice of life story. It feels heavily influenced by the Icewind Dale campaign setting, which I first came into contact with when I was reading the George Stewart stories. But there is also like a tabletop campaign setting here for that. It's called a different worlds like name here in the story, so it's not like knocking off any trademark names. But you can definitely see like the influence of that particular campaign setting, which is really fun for me. That's definitely a plus. I'm not saying that's bad. This is a plus for me. I like that campaign setting. I love those novels. It was kind of like, for me, it was a positive because I'd spent so much time in those other worlds already. It felt like a very familiar world building experience, man. And I kind of enjoyed going back to that setting, for me anyways. Overall, it's a good story. It pulls heavily again from the D&D tabletop experience. And if you like that experience, if you like reading stories and like feeling those kind of like, oh, is this dice roll going to go well? And if it goes really well, what are the consequences? If it goes really poorly, what are the consequences where? I think you're going to enjoy the story. It's one of the things I like the most about it. And again, if you also like that Icewind Dale setting, you're going to enjoy this. So for me, it's a solid 7.5 out of 10. That's Winterborn with a score of 7.5 out of 10. And next we have Gameport, BlueMatterSeries version 1. BlueMatterSeries written by Jules Bray. It is 326 pages, 99 cents. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. Her last sim took everything she had. This one took what was left. Tasman Noonan is level 0, and that's all she knows. She learns her name from a stranger who seems more confused than she is about where they are. He can't even work the user interface. Tam is the one who figures out they're in a virtual reality game, one with no exit. Desperate for answers, she begins a series of quests to regain her memory. The more she learns, however, the more betrayed she feels. This isn't the first time she's been fooled into a virtual reality simulation, left to wonder what's real and what isn't. Last time, her own brother set her up, and it looks like he's done it again. But this time, the project leaders have lost control of the sim. The game has been infiltrated by saboteurs, some anti-tech religious fanatics who killed Tam's parents. They seem hellbent on destroying the sim and everyone in it. Tam has one chance to get her old life back, but it will mean joining forces with the people who deceived her, playing their game and trusting everyone to get it right. So there you go. I'll be honest, that novel description is a lot more interesting than this actual story, like a lot of it. That novel actually describes a larger cyberpunkish plot where people wake up and find themselves without their memory in a fantasy RPG. They can regain their memories by mining a higher level resource, but first they have to choose a class and do starter quests and train. The plot focuses on this aspect of why they lost their memories, the information being fed to them, and if any of it is true or not. It's actually not a terrible plotline of like the cyberpunkish storylines I've read before. This isn't bad. Like, it kind of really does incorporate into like the game mechanics of a story, of a game like kind of story here. However, that's not the majority of the story, and that's kind of unfortunate because it definitely conflicts with the general slice of life story that takes up, like, I want to say 60% of this novel. The other 40% is definitely deals with that plot line. But a lot of that plot is really developed towards the middle to the end of the story. The beginning half of it, the majority of it is very much like this slice of life. It feels like filler. It really does. It is a little bit of story. I'm not saying it's not, but a lot of that early portion of the story feels like all the quests and storylines and adventuring they do. It really just feels like filler to get to like the next little nugget of the plot line, and that's unfortunate. The main character and the group choose their classes, quests, level up as the resource gather, train, upgrade their equipment. But again, while their adventures aren't bad within themselves, they don't feel like they're important because again, that plot line is always looming there where it's like, oh, we're going to do some adventures and level and stuff. And they're like, here's the plot. It has nothing to do with like what you've been doing. And it's literally a part of the story where like, they're just kind of wasting time. like it's really part of the storyline where it's like, oh, we're trying to keep you guys occupied for a particular purpose. So all this leveling stuff, it's just kind of there to fill your time. And I'm like, okay, it definitely feels that way in the story for me, at least, as a LitRPG reader. So that it just wasn't as enjoyable as I was hoping it would be. Game mechanic wise, it's kind of a semi-custom system that will feel familiar to tabletop players. Fantasy D&D type quest, classes, stats, skills, all that good stuff. It's definitely crunchy with lots of notifications, character sheets, lots of gamer talk, and thinking as the main characters group tries to level up and master their chosen classes. On a game mechanic level, there's nothing really outstanding there. It's not bad though. It's kind of middle of the road. The gamer mentality does come through clearly for the story, and it's definitely LitRPG. Overall though, I was kind of bored. And again, part of that is because a lot of the stuff that's happened in the story like feels like it doesn't matter. So I'm like, it was really kind of hard to invest in the story and invest in the characters. The characters have some personality. And there's some decent dialogue and banter here, but I never cared about anybody. I was never like invested in the main character or anybody really, to see that they wanted to succeed or fail. It's like, if they all would have been murdered, I'm like, oh, okay, there you go. End of the story. I wouldn't have cared one way or the other. And part of that is the fact that nobody knows who they are. And that's a big part of like the first half of that story. So there's no background for them. There's nothing like for me to latch onto and to empathize with. And even though that does shift in the story, by the time it does, I'm like, okay, I just haven't cared about these characters for like the first half of this book. So why should I continue? Right. And so that was already something that was already working against the story to a degree. Another big issue is the fact that, again, a lot of that happens in the first part of the story just doesn't matter to the main cyberpunk plot. And even the stuff that happens afterwards, I was like, oh, I could probably skip all this stuff and still just like pick up the cyberpunk stuff and still have an enjoyable time, or have a more enjoyable time. I would be skipping a lot of filler. And that's kind of what it felt like. Even though that's not your experience reading it, it just felt like that way to me. The RPG stuff comes through again as very clearly as like the author has gamer experiences, which is great, but it wasn't enough to kind of carry the entire story, unfortunately. Combat in the story is kind of mediocre. So it's not a big draw there, unfortunately. And again, while the adventures the group kind of goes through aren't bad, again, they're not important to the story, at least to me. And it felt like they're just like there to take up space until like every like 10 to 15 to 20%, like a new little nugget to the plot was revealed. So there you go. Didn't really work for me. It's kind of bored. It gets a score of 5 out of 10 for me, which is just bored. So it's Gameport BlueMatterSeries Volume 1 or Version 1 with the score of 5 out of 10. Okay, next is Light Online, book number 2, Keeper, written by Tom Lacombe. It is 527 pages. It is $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. Eddie Hunter isn't stuck in the game Light Online, but if he wants to keep his job, he needs to stay there. It's not a hardship for him, as he increasingly believes that his in-game life is far preferable to his out-of-game life. Working on a hidden development quest that he discovered by accident has him becoming more and more entrepreneurial, even while running his own inn. But between him and his party, the Meadowlands is rapidly developing. The goblin from the Forest of Fools have noticed the Meadowlands growing stronger as well and start attacking out of the forest. They seem to be growing smarter as the Meadowlands do. The Meadowlands themselves are changing, also offering more challenges and rewards as Eddie completes more of his quest. Eddie finally decides he can't keep everything going on his own. Between running an inn, building things necessary for his quest, adventuring, and more, he's getting to the point where important things are slipping his mind. When a dungeon is discovered in the Meadowlands, where there was never one before, he gives in and relegates himself to an assistant in running his own inn so that he and his party can test themselves against it in an attempt to grow their own power levels. So there you go. And that's a fairly good description of the novel. It definitely undercuts one of the points in the story I think is kind of neat, but it's an entertaining sequel. I really enjoyed book number 1 in the series. Book number 2, I think, is actually even better, so it gets a slightly higher review score. But there's crafting, town building, and action in this story. And I think those are going to be the big draws for most audience members. Looking at the reviews in the story, this is done really well for the fans in the series, and the sales in this is done like pretty primo. So congratulations to the author. there is a new kind of twist to the story. I think in book 1, it was like a hacking situation, which is the plot line. In book number 2, there's a different kind of storyline with employees of the company taking over the rules on monsters and how that kind of influences them and how they're influencing then the game world. It's a bit outside of that kind of loose new way of conflict being introduced in the story. A lot of the story is very slice of life with the main character, again, crafting, town building with his and adventuring with his friends in this game world. And it's kind of fun. It's just kind of fun to follow them along. If you like book number 1, you're going to like book number 2, I think. And for people who enjoy crafting, who like town building, they're really going to enjoy this because that's a good chunk of this story. So for me, it gets a score of 7.6 out of 10. That's the Light Online book number 2 Keeper with a score of 7.6 out of 10. And that is it for the show, ladies and gentlemen. We are finished. Thank you, everyone. Hope you guys have some good happy holidays, Christmas, Christmas and New Year's. It's 2020 by the time you're going to be listening to this. So happy New Year's, everybody. Hope you guys have a great year. Hope you guys had an amazing 2019, and 2020 hopefully is going to be even better. We have tons of new literature stories coming out this year, and even more being written by new authors, and hopefully I can get to most of them. Or you can have new contributors come in who give their own reviews and can kind of build this community of reviewers who enjoy LitRPG and who are giving their opinions to help you, the listener and the watcher and the viewer, hints on and tips on like what the good stories are, what you should spend your money on, which ones you should kind of avoid. Because we all have limited funds, we all have limited time. So we always want to point to the good stuff and help you avoid the stuff that isn't amazing, or just help you find something new. So that's always a fun part of this community as well. So thanks. And I want to remember, you can always follow us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Patreon. Just look for the LitRPG Podcast. We also have a website, litrpgpodcast.com, where you can find all of our review scores for the 900 plus reviews that we've done over the years. You can look for new tags, dungeon cores, female authors, female main characters, people of color, and any other combinations of words you can think of for stories that you enjoy. We always have a little tag section at the bottom of reviews that shows, oh, these are the things in the story. Click on it, you can find more of those kind of things. So definitely check us out there at our website, and our novel recommendations section, of course. But until folks, we can hang out again. Remember that you can go remember to read some more LitRPG. I hope you guys have a good year. We'll see you later.